Welcome to the lighter side of the spectrum, the podcast that celebrates the multiple hats we wear and the juggling acts we perform in life. Whether you're parenting kids and teens on the autism spectrum, navigating the ever-evolving healthcare industry, or building a more inclusive and impactful world, this is your space to find connection, inspiration, and growth. Together, we'll share stories, tackle challenges, and explore how innovation and inclusion create better outcomes for everyone. Because no matter the spectrum, there's always a lighter side. Now here's your host, David Kaufer.
Hello again, everybody. This is David Kaufer. Welcome back to the lighter side of the spectrum, where we explore the people, ideas, and Stone. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Good.
Good.
Happy.
No
good.
And conversations that help us better understand autism, communication, and what it really means to support human potential. You know, one of the things I've certainly learned over the last few years is that so many of the assumptions that we make about people turn out to be wrong. We've learned that what looks like a lack of understanding may actually be a motor planning challenge. We've also learned that what looks like a behavioral issue may be sensory overload. What appears to be an inability to communicate may simply be a person who hasn't been given the right way to communicate. Today's conversation is going to ask us to consider another assumption. What if vision isn't just about seeing clearly? You know, most of us think of vision as reading the eye chart at your doctor's office, trying to see if you have 20/20 vision. You know, if you're good to go. But what if your eyes are healthy, yet your brain isn't using them together in the way it's meant to be? What if the issue isn't how well you see, but how you see? And that's the fascinating world we're going to step into today. And my guest today is Denise Allen, host of Healing Our Sight podcast, and a passionate advocate for helping people better understand binocular vision and the remarkable adaptability of the human brain. Denise spent most of her life with Strabismus. I knew I was going to screw it up. Wow. Help me, Denise. Strabismus. I even practiced it. And without stereoscopic or 3D vision, like many people, she assumed that was simply the way her brain worked. But as an adult, she discovered that our visual system may be far more adaptable than many of us realize. And that journey led her into the worlds of vision therapy, neuroplasticity, developmental optometry, and neuroscience. Along the way, she's had conversations with leading experts while helping parents, patients, and professionals better understand conditions and related to vision-related challenges. So this isn't about autism specifically, but we certainly see it within autism. And I think it's really going to be a fascinating conversation because vision, sensory processing, motor planning, communication, they're all parts of an incredibly complex system. So Denise, with all that being said, thanks for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience? Tell us about what is it like to grow up with this condition?
Well, you know, I didn't know anything different, so I thought I was pretty normal.
Okay.
But I did have struggles with coordination, being very clumsy, not very good at catching balls or any moving object coming at me. Was difficult to gauge where it was and catch it. So I was really bad at ball games. So I was usually chosen last, that kind of thing.
Right.
That posed a problem, of course. My knees were always scraped up, I fell down. I just thought I was a clumsy kid,
Yeah. So you just thought you were clumsy. I mean, right? Like you hear about that.
So my mom put me in dance class. That was supposed to help. Didn't love it that much.
Not bad, no.
No, it did help. And then I actually did gymnastics in junior high, which I shouldn't have probably been able to do very well. I was too tall for it.
Wow.
But that's challenging. It doesn't stop someone from doing something that they want to do. My brother, who had the same condition, only his showed up when he was a baby. He became a basketball player. He played college basketball, which also shouldn't really be very easy, but he was passionate about basketball.
Wow.
So he overcame that. So I think we don't have to discount anything, right? But the thing that I've found is that it can be way easier.
That's just, yeah. Stone's very excited today. So again, he's making lots of appearances. He's getting ready to head out with his brother. But that's amazing, though. I mean, that he was able to play basketball. Because again, why don't you? I mean, we'll back up a little bit and maybe kind of talk about strabismus. Is that, did I get it better? That
Yeah.
okay. What is it? You know, and how is it defined, and how does it impact people?
Yeah. So strabismus is when the eyes don't focus together. And the easy explanation is just that they're fighting with each other all the time. And in order to compensate for that, one of the eyes will shut off. And when you look at someone, often that eye is pointing in the another direction
Okay.
because it's getting out of the way of the other eye that's the strong eye. So you'll see kids with an eye turn, right? Crossed eyes, however you want to term it, right? It can
Yeah.
be turning in or it can be turning out. People will call it a lazy eye,
Yeah.
walleye,
Yeah. You hear
depending.
about that. Okay. So that's
Exactly.
kind of part
And
of
so
it. Or
it's like 5% of the population that have an actual strabismus like this, of the normal population. If you're looking at the autistic spectrum, then it's totally different. And that's just strabismus. That's not other vision problems like inability to track or
right.
other focusing types of issues like that. So mine is kind of a subset, but it's a much bigger problem than that.
Is this something that we're just, like so many other things, we're just learning more about? I mean, is it one of we're just getting more awareness? Because growing up, I mean, what was, like you said, you were just kind of considered maybe a little clumsy, or you went in for traditional eye exams, right? Like, was it just, what did the eye doctors see or say, and what did it take for you to finally figure it out?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I think that it's always been a problem. I just feel like the fact that we can do something about it hasn't been very obvious. So
Mm-hmm.
my brother, it was obvious at birth. He went into the doctor. They did surgery on his eyes because it was pointing way in.
So it
Surgery
was
on.
so obvious that like they're
Mhm.
like, okay, we got to fix this. I mean,
Exactly. Yeah. And the
yeah.
traditional solution when you have this kind of an eye turn is the ophthalmologist will say, well, we're going to do surgery. They'll do 2 or 3 surgeries. Often it takes more than one. My brother had 3 surgeries.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 2 when he was a baby and 1 when he was like 7 to kind of tune it up. So it's kind of a lot of surgery for a young child. It doesn't teach the eyes how to work together, though, to have surgery. So even though my brother's eyes were fairly straight, he didn't learn how to see depth. My problem didn't surface until I was almost 3. So it's a different type of strabismus. There's infantile, like my brother, and then there's a compensatory type of strabismus. And usually means that you have either farsighted or nearsightedness, and your eyes are not working together and they're compensating. And they put glasses on the child like they did me, and the eyes look pretty straight. And the doctor says, okay, you're good to go. And
Just because your eyes were straight.
exactly. And I remember as a child going in for my yearly exam, and I was about 10, and they did this test where you look in the big machine, and
Mm-hmm.
on one side there's a note, and on the other side there's the 5 lines for the music staff. And they said, can you tell us what line or space that note's on? And I said, well, I see the notes over here and I see the lines over here. Do you want me to guess? And I had been guessing until then,
Oh,
but
really?
something just clicked, and I thought, and I was annoyed because I'd had a traumatic event on the way to the office, and so I think I was probably a little more sassy than usual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A little edgy 10-year-old.
And I just said, "Do you want me to guess? Because I can't, I see them on, with each eye." And I had never been able to see through binoculars or, the little kaleidoscope thing,
Oh yeah,
you
yeah.
used to,
Those were fun. Yeah.
yeah, I could never do those. And they just said, "Oh, you can't do that. We won't do that anymore."
That was their answer.
Yeah.
Oh, great. That's helpful.
Yeah. And, vision therapy has been around that long, but nobody knew about it. I didn't know about
No,
it until
no.
I went looking for answers as a, 40 something year old because my eyes were bothering me more at that point.
Well, I think there's still a real lack of understanding about vision therapy. Um,
Absolutely.
it was something I had heard about again in our journey with autism ourselves. It's just one of many avenues that you explore when you're dealing with communication. And I remember hearing about we have a place, I'm in the Seattle area, and checking it out, but that was all new, just the whole idea of doing vision therapy, because again, it's so you just think about it, you just get eye exams and you get glasses. You don't think about this as something, another area, although it makes perfect sense once you start looking at it a little more closely.
Right. Yeah. And I didn't start looking until my eye turn started to become really bad in my 40s.
Mm,
I started to get presbyopia like a lot of us do at that age, can't see till you're, have your hand clear out here.
wow.
And so my eye turn just got worse, and I looked at natural vision improvement things, and I started searching online, and I just by accident, not by accident, right, came across vision therapy, found out there was a doctor just down the street from me, and there were only two in the whole state of Utah at that point, and went in and had an exam and figured out that there was something we could do.
Wow. Well, I'm glad that you found that. What was it like then? I mean, what and how, tell me about that experience after you started going through the therapy. Did you experience like true depth perception for the first time, or, things like that?
Well, it wasn't quite that easy. This
Okay.
was
Yeah. It wasn't like, yeah,
no,
fair, fair.
it was about 2013. I started vision therapy, did a lot of sessions of therapy, and I just wasn't getting any resolution at all. I wasn't getting any progress. And my doctor said, you can look at surgery. That could be what you might want to do in addition. And I didn't want to do surgery, so I stopped vision therapy, took my daughter in, found out that she was mini me and that she needed
Wow.
vision therapy.
Okay.
Well, and
So this is
I knew,
truly genetic, it sounds like,
yeah,
to a,
it's hard to say. Yeah, it's
yeah,
hard to
yeah.
say. But I mean, I have six children. My youngest daughter was just like me. I knew she
Okay.
was like me because she had had an eye turn when she was 3, like I did. And I had taken her to the doctor and they put her in glasses. It was just, the same process. And she was fine. She did fine in school. She didn't seem to struggle that much in other things. She didn't seem to be super clumsy. I had done other things with her when she was very young, like music and movement. I taught music and movement classes. And so there were things that maybe compensated better. I don't know. And,
Right.
and I didn't see her doing poorly in school or having any struggles. And I had this passion for sharing the whole thing, because I knew it could help. It hadn't helped me yet, but I knew it could. And so I was reading this book called When Your Child Struggles by David Cook.
Mm-hmm.
And it had a checklist in it of things to ask the child. And I was thinking about it in relationship to children that I was experiencing at school when I was substitute teaching. But
Oh, okay.
I decided to practice the questions on my daughter. And so
Oh, wow.
I said to her, "Do the words ever do this when you're reading?" And the split apart. And she said yes. And I thought, "Oh, that's not
Oh,
good." I
right.
had no idea that she was seeing double when
And how old was she at this point? Remind me.
she was 9.
Okay, so okay, yeah,
Yeah. So starting to be very aware of
yeah.
that. And potentially have problems later on, because reading the words just keep getting smaller, right? And more difficult. So I said, well, do you ever close an eye when you're reading? That was also on the checklist. And she said, oh, yeah, all the time when I'm reading in bed, I lay with my eye on the pillow so that I'm reading just with the one eye. And she said, and then I turn over when I turn the page and do it with the other eye. So that was
Oh,
helping
wow.
avoid double vision, right? And
Yeah.
I had
Yeah. Like she
no,
kind of figured it out. Like she had her own solution. I mean, to cope with it
exactly,
was it was a coping mechanism, basically.
exactly. Yes. And I don't know if she did any of that at school. Sometimes children will, they'll sit with their hand up like this, cover an eye
Mm-hmm.
and just make other compensatory
Yeah.
actions that will help them to not have that problem. So she was doing all of those things. I had no idea. And I thought I was a pretty aware mom. She was child number
I'm sure you were.
6.
Yeah.
So I
Right.
was
Right.
busy,
Right.
but I kind of was beating myself up a little bit about it. So I took her into my vision therapy doctor, and he got her in vision therapy. It took about 9 months of therapy for her, and she was able to gain 3D. So it was
Great.
a pretty easy process. It is something for a lot of people that you kind of have to keep doing a little bit of to keep the skill.
Kind of like exercise in a
A,
way.
a little bit, yeah. So
Yeah.
I think she might have lost a little ground. We've talked about that over the years. She's been on my podcast too and told her story. So it, she recognizes that there might be some things she could do to kind of strengthen her ability still. And in the
But
meantime,
it
my doctor,
takes time and effort to do that.
it does. Yeah, it does. And for some people, it takes way longer, and there are cases that take less time. But I think 9 months is a fairly standard or comfortable amount of time that it will take for people for kids. Kids are much more malleable than adults are. So
Oh
I
yeah,
went
absolutely.
I went back in at the end of that process. My doctor had done some training and some other kinds of therapy. I went in, I tried those, and still wasn't getting the results I wanted. At this point, I'm like 80 sessions into vision therapy. And once again, he said, you probably need to look at surgery. So he referred me to a doctor that he's worked with. I went in, I had the strabismus surgery. If you
Okay.
don't know what that looks like, it's, you go in, they cut all the muscles and they move them so that your eyes are lined up instead of crossed.
Wow. I mean, that's a big step. I could see why you would want to avoid it if at all possible. I think anytime for most of us, right, you talk about our eyes or eye surgery is just it's different. It
Yeah.
hits different than just saying, oh, we got to do some elbow surgery, for example, or something like that, right?
Well, I mean, when you're cutting a muscle, I think
Yeah,
you tend to hesitate before you're
it's
going
your
to do it.
eyes. It's your,
That,
all right.
yep.
Like that's very
Yeah,
personal to all of us. So, but
right.
it sounds like obviously it was a success.
Yeah, it was amazing. I had a really easy time with the surgery. I took like one pain med. I decided the pain meds weren't really helping me. I not doing good things to my body. I
Hmm.
said, not
Okay.
doing that. And so I'm really into natural remedies. So
Yeah.
I took this homeopathic remedy called arnica
Oh, okay.
instead of any of the other drugs they had given me. And I went back for my checkup a week later. And my eye doctor said, I can't believe how fast you've recovered from this surgery. And I said,
Wow.
great, thank you. And that week I also went back into vision therapy. And they don't necessarily recommend that you do that. A lot of times doctors will say, oh, you should recover first or whatever. I mean, I was recovered, but uh, not everybody will go back in that quickly. And as soon as I went back in, I could do everything that I hadn't been able to do
Wow.
before. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That
So
must have been amazing.
it was, yeah. And I gained, pretty good depth perception, especially close up. My depth perception is in normal range. Further out, it's not quite as good. So I'm still working on that.
And I'm just curious, do you have 20/20 vision as well now, or do you?
There's no relationship between
Right.
the way that the eyes focus together and the
vision,
the acuity piece.
the acuity
Yeah,
piece. Oh,
we
right.
we think that vision is just all about seeing 20/20, and it's not at all. So vision therapy doesn't fix that piece. I
Okay.
still need glasses.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I mean, I wear contacts, but
Contacts. Yeah.
yeah, that piece doesn't get fixed by therapy like that. And there are other things that we can do to improve the acuity piece, but that's not typically done in a regular doctor's office. That kind of goes into the realm of natural vision improvement.
Okay. But that's remarkable that you recover that quickly. Do you attribute it to the homeopathic approach that you took, or just were there other steps that you took that maybe helped accelerate it?
I think that that's what I've typically attributed it to, but I also am really healthy, and mindset also plays into it. The
I'm
fact
sure it
that I
did.
had never had a surgery before made it easier. People who've
Mm.
had other strabismus surgeries, there's scar tissue that's going to get in the way, and it makes it a harder process.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Early you were talking about how it affects roughly 5% of the general population, but
Mhm.
the percentage is a lot higher when you're talking about the neurodiverse or the autistic population. Do you have any estimates of
You know what?
how high
I
it is?
I thought you might ask me that. So I pulled out
Okay.
this book that I like.
Uh,
It's called, can you see it?
yeah, I guess.
It's
Yeah, kind of a
The
little bit.
Hidden Link Between Vision and Learning by Wendy Rosen. She's one of my podcast guests, and
Oh,
I
great.
I knew she had told me this, or that I had read it, and so I looked it up, and um, it says, according to her, that about 25% of children in the United States struggle with learning problems, and then 25% of children also have a vision problem that impedes learning. So let's see, maybe there's a connection there, right?
Hmm.
Um, and according to the National Center for Health Statistics, 20 to 25% of children enter school with significant vision problems. So, and that's not just strabismus, that's other vision issues, right? Um, the greatest difficulty among learning disabled children is with reading, which is affecting 75% of that population. And 80% of these children struggle with one or more visual skills.
Wow,
So that's a huge number.
that is a huge number. And as you're talking about it, I'm thinking, as it relates to the autistic and the non-speaking community,
Mm-hmm.
is that how frustrating that must be. So, because there are a lot of non-speakers who have gained communication through the letterboard or typing or, other methodologies.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it finally comes out that they have vision issues. It could be double vision or, similar types of issues. Of course, they
Right.
had no way to share that before. Right. So
Right.
they're, like you said,
Yeah.
they're trying to cope. They're trying to cope
Mm-hmm.
with vision issues without having the way to share that, to communicate like, hey, I can't see in 3D, or I can't, I'm seeing double of everything, these words or all of that.
Yeah. Well, and everyone thinks that this is just the way you see. They have no idea that someone else sees differently than they do.
Right, right. Like,
Even
to
when,
your
even
point,
those of
like
us that,
growing up, you're
yeah.
like, oh, it's just this is just the way it is.
Hmm. Yeah. My daughter had no idea that anyone saw any differently than she did either, you know,
And
and
she didn't
she,
think it was, I won't say weird, but different. She didn't think anything about reading the way that she read, for example. Like that was just the way it was. You just,
uh-huh.
cover up one eye and roll over and do the other eye. That's
Exactly.
just that's just what you do.
Exactly. Yep.
So what role does neuroplasticity play in vision? I mean, what, when it comes to this, like you said, it's not just looking 20/20. Are there is vision therapy, does that deal with issues with the brain in terms of training the brain as well?
That's exactly what it's doing. Yeah.
Okay.
We're training the brain to see correctly because the eyes themselves are just an organ, right? The muscles are not going to do anything you don't tell them to do. So if the brain isn't telling the eyes what to do,
Hmm.
you're not going to see properly, regardless. Vision really is just in the brain, and we don't think of it that way. We think it's our
No.
eyes are seeing, but I mean, our arm's not going to move if our brain doesn't tell it to. So why do we think our eyes know what to do if our brain doesn't tell them what to do?
Why do we think that, Denise? That's a good question. I mean, that because it's true. Absolutely the perception. You don't
Yeah,
think of it as a muscle. You don't think of it as something that your brain has to control. I guess unless you're really in a situation when that kind of focus is required. Anything from like looking through a microscope or binoculars or whatever, where you're like, oh, you're actually focused on the task at hand. I guess you just take it
Mhm.
for granted. I mean,
We all take it for granted all the time,
do
and
you? Yeah.
yeah,
Go ahead. Kind of like
you're
walking. Again, you
mhm,
take advantage. You take it for granted if you're able to walk. If
right.
you've gone through that progression, that's all you know. You learn to crawl, you learn to walk. You want to go from point A to point B, you walk there. You don't think about your brains telling your legs to move.
Exactly.
I guess
Yep.
it's the same for vision.
And if our eye muscles aren't working properly, it's no different than any other muscle in our body, and we do exercise to strengthen those muscles or to relax
Absolutely.
those muscles, right? And in the case of our eyes, we really need to relax the muscles in order for them to see properly. And we never think of it that way either.
No, not at all. I mean, you're starting to see some awareness in terms of eyes. I'm thinking about like with eye fatigue now with all the screen time, things kind of related to that. Hey, you
Yeah,
need to give your eyes a break. You don't want to be staring at a screen for hours on end and all
right.
that. But I still feel like it's fairly shallow in terms of the approach that we take.
I agree. Absolutely. Yep.
Um, yeah, I was thinking also especially with kids and screen time and this all overlaps, but could these problems sometimes look like ADHD or learning disabilities or sensory issues?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the fact that we see it in this population should point that out a little bit. If the same kids that are struggling are the ones who have a vision problem, then, which came first? And
Right, right.
what's the best way to deal with it, right? And, I have another favorite book that I wanted to share.
Yeah, please.
There's a couple that were written by Robin and Gillian Benoit. One of them's called Jillian's Story, and then I have this one. It's Dear Jillian,
Hmm.
and they talk in this book about. Well, in the first one, she tells Jillian's story, and Jillian had amblyopia. She had passed every eye exam, and the way she passed it, and I don't know if you know what amblyopia is, or if your
I do
listeners
not.
know. Okay,
No.
well, it's a type of strabismus. Amblyopia, you have lower acuity in one eye. So if you can't see very well out of one eye, you're just going to use the other eye. And that
Okay.
eye just kind of shuts off. And sometimes, if that happens for a long period of time, the person really goes blind in that eye. And it just kind of becomes, they treat it as a permanent kind of problem. I don't agree that any of that's permanent, but there's different perceptions on that.
Okay.
Anyway, Jillian had pretty significant amblyopia, but she'd passed every test when they've done the eye exam at the school because she thought it was like a memorization test. And so she would listen
Mm.
to the kids in front of her and she wanted to get the treat, right? And so she would just rattle off whatever they said, even though she couldn't see it at all.
Wow. I
So,
mean, it's ingenious, but again, not helpful in terms of what they were.
exactly. Yeah. And so when she finally got into vision therapy, then, she was able to overcome that and gain 3D vision and then tell her story, and then all these people started writing to her saying, hey, let me tell you my story. And that's what went into the second book, right? And she did talk to someone that was autistic,
Oh,
their
interesting.
family, right? And
Yeah.
that's why I wanted to share this because I think this is a really great story about it. This child was only 2 when they figured out that well, he was diagnosed as autistic, but then they figured out that he also had an eye issue that could be helped with vision therapy. So they took him to vision therapy, and he was able to progress so much that he graduated from the autistic program that he was in with the school system. They said he doesn't qualify as being autistic anymore.
Interesting. Yeah, that's
So
great.
I think that that's just kind of points to the fact that there's so much more going on.
There's so much
And
more going on. Absolutely.
and we can look at the symptoms and say, well, it's got to be this, but that may not be the case. And so there's a lot of misdiagnosis of ADHD and
Right.
dyslexia and all of those learning issues that we really should check the vision to see if that's what's causing the problem or if it can help the problem.
Right, for sure.
It's all working together.
And it seems that there is not a big emphasis on vision screening, really. I mean, it's almost like a kind of a last resort. And do you think, again, is that lack of awareness, Denise, or is it just resources? I mean, what would you attribute, or would
There's
you?
so much that goes into that. Such a loaded question.
Okay, so all right.
I had to remove myself from the school system because it was such a hot topic for me personally. Because I wanted to go in there and I wanted to tell every parent, you know what, if your child is struggling in school, you need to take them to a developmental optometrist, not a regular optometrist,
Right.
because those guys tell you everything's fine your whole life. That's what happened for me. That's what happened to my daughter. I specifically asked my optometrist if she had a problem with depth perception, and he told me she was fine. So you can't even get this kind of a diagnosis at a regular doctor's office. And they're not
Interesting.
going to screen for it in a school system, right? They're only screening for acuity, at the eye chart across the room. There are things they can do that are not that hard, but they're not equipped all the time to do it. And what I found when I said, I really want to tell this parent that they should take their child to the correct eye doctor, the school system said, you can't tell them
Why? What? Why not?
because the school doesn't want to have to pay for vision therapy.
Mm, yeah, it comes down to finances.
Hmm.
So they aren't even questioning. I'm drawing a parallel because in terms of like in the non-speaking world, there are issues with schools not allowing the use of letterboards or
Mm, okay.
communication partners in there. And again, part of it's financial. Part of it in this case is also claims that it's not effective. I mean, there's a lot of other excuses they use in this. But I was curious. So with this, though, you think it's purely financial? Or do they don't even they don't care if it's effective or not? They just care about the cost.
Well, they're not trained to do it, and they don't have the funds to pay for, a developmental optometrist to do it.
But they could still recommend it, couldn't they? I mean, couldn't they
You
at
would
least or
think.
educate? I mean, I don't see the harm in at least. I understand them saying, "Hey, we can't provide this necessarily if this is an additional cost, additional burden." I mean, I know
Mm.
financially, right? I mean, we ask a lot of our schools and stuff, and that's another topic. But I can at least understand that from a financial standpoint, if that's just an additional cost to burden. But
Yeah.
to at least say, "Hey, here's something you should look at." Um,
I think
I,
it's a big problem. Yeah, that's why I'm saying I had to just not be in education, and that kind of pointed me towards what I ended up doing, right? At the end of the day, that's why I'm doing podcasting because we need awareness.
So that really did just kind of because you were teaching, right? You were
I was substituting. Yeah,
I mean, you
it
got
kind
6
of.
kids. I'm sure you've been busy. It's hard to
I
juggle it all, but yeah.
Yeah, no, in the meantime, I had to find something that was going to pay the bills, right?
Yeah.
So instead of going the route of uh, alternative route to licensure and getting a teaching certificate and being in the school system, I got my insurance license. I sold insurance for 10 years, finished
Great.
raising my children and all of that. And in the meantime, that gave me flexibility to focus on my own healing, to do my vision therapy, to get my child in and get all of that handled, get them all married off. And then
That's good.
um, then I was able to spend more time on my podcast.
And remind me, how long have you been doing your podcast?
I started it in 2020, about the
Holy
time
cow, good
COVID
for
hit.
you. Wow.
Mhm.
That's amazing.
Yeah, well, and I started it before I had everybody out of the house, and there were some down times. I think every podcaster gets to the point where they're questioning whether they're able to continue, right?
Sure.
And my point in time happened when I had 3 daughters get married in the space of 4 months in the summer of
Wow.
2021. I blame that on COVID. Because
COVID marriages.
well, they were all dating from the dating apps and stuff, and they all
Couldn't they have
found
planned
someone.
that a little bit, spread it out a little bit for your sake? I mean, geez, that's a
Yeah,
lot.
you would think. Yeah. So that happened. And so I had my third daughter get married by September of that year. And then I had one podcast come out that year, in that summer.
Yeah.
And then I had some technical issues and I just let life get to me, the whole now I'm an empty nester. What's my life look like? And and then in April of 2022, I actually lost my husband in a motorcycle accident.
Oh, no, I'm so sorry.
And so that
That's
kind of
huge.
shut me
Yeah.
down as a podcaster too, so people look at my dates on my podcast, there's this huge gap in there.
Well,
And then
understandably.
I
Yeah.
finally had to just say, you know what, this is why I'm still here. Part of why I'm still here, is because I still have work to do. I mean, there's a reason why he had to go and I had to stay.
Yeah.
So I got back into it.
What are some of the lessons you've learned? I'm curious from podcasting, first of all, and some of the guests that you've had on there. What are a couple of maybe surprising things that have come from that journey?
Surprising is a good question. I started to see how the whole body fits into the picture.
Yes,
Because if
that's
we look
interesting.
at it just from the eye standpoint, we limit ourselves, you know? And if we look at it from a whole body perspective, then we can say, okay, what is the real cause of this problem? Is there an alignment problem in the body that we can look at that will help us along the way, or that is signaling that there's something going on with the eyes, even? This is a great example from my own life. I was born pigeon-toed,
Okay.
so we already have a misalignment, right? The way they handled that back in my day, since I'm so old, is that they would put casts on the baby's feet.
I remember hearing
Oh.
about that.
For like 6 weeks. And then uh, after the cast comes off, then they put a bar with the orthopedic shoes, right? And the shoes are pointing out, and you have to wear that and most of the time. Protect. I remember it being during naps and stuff. Like it was a thing that. Well, I had to do it with my oldest daughter too. Like my daughter had the same problem.
Oh,
So
wow.
I know. So there's that misalignment that I think you should pay attention to, because the
Right,
body's
right.
telling us something, right?
Yeah.
It's telling us that we need to pay attention to what's going on as far as I take it personally, I take it back to feelings too, but with my guests, I have talked with them about the fact that there's misalignments in the body that we could address as well. So it's kind of a long answer. I don't know if that gives you
It
exactly what you.
does. Yeah, no, no, I'm just kind of thinking as you're talking about that, the whole body approach. I think it makes so much sense. I think it's something that we've continued to learn about, as people in the medical profession. It's kind of getting back to what you said earlier. It's kind of funny. Can we start? The topic was talking about kind of the vision therapy, and then of course you think about just the eyes, right? This is just has to, and we do that with our body, right? It's just and in healthcare in general, we isolate things at just one thing. Oh, you have a problem with headaches or whatever. So it's just, it's a headache problem. And, where could we find out later could be something related to a spine issue, a misalignment. That's everything. To your point, everything is so much more connected than
Right.
I think we're taught or realize or assume or whatever. I'm not sure. It's kind of like one of those systemic things. And I think some of it's probably just kind of the, traditional healthcare approach that specialists in our age of specialists, you kind of choose a specialty. And so,
Mhm.
right. I don't know.
Yeah. And they don't talk to each other,
And they
you
don't
know.
talk, right.
And in our world today with vision, even the ophthalmologists and the vision therapy doctors don't typically talk to each other either, which I think is malpractice, honestly, because there's so much good that can be done when they collaborate. If I hadn't had vision therapy, surgery, and more vision therapy, I would not have gained 3D vision.
Right.
But there's so few doctors that work together, and if you go in and you only have the surgery, the percentage of success isn't even being measured.
Wow.
If you want the result to be 3D vision, they're only measuring whether the eyes are aligned. So they consider it a cosmetic
That's
surgery.
so cosmetic surgery. Right.
Mhm.
That makes sense. Wow. Why don't they talk more? Is it ego? Is it just, is there, is it a turf battle? I mean, I honestly don't know. I mean, again, we
That,
see this in other areas, right? I mean,
yeah.
I'm drawing analogies to the world I'm most familiar with in the autism world, but in this world, what do you see, Denise?
Um, I think it's an ego problem personally. I think they're so caught up in where's the scientific proof. Well, who's going to do these studies that prove that you're gaining 3D vision? You know, it's it,
Aha. So is that kind of their,
yeah, they'll say there's no studies that prove it works. Well, there's all kinds of people who can say, look, this worked for me. But everyone's problem is so specific. Doing double-blind studies doesn't even work. I mean, how would you even do a study like that? You
how would
can't
you, right?
you can't find people whose situation is exactly the same. No one's is. So you can't do a study on it.
That is so interesting. And again, I was just going to say, Denise, that's the connection.
Mm.
Because that's exactly the battle that parents and of non-speakers are fighting as well in our world. And when talking about the world of letterboards and, we call it spelling to communicate and all this, the establishment, in this case, the Speech and Hearing Association, Therapist Association, they use the exact same argument. There's no, this isn't scientific.
Hmm.
There's no scientific proof. And the response is, the proof is in what you're seeing. I mean, people are using it successfully, and it sounds very similar to what you're saying with vision therapy. So,
Yeah.
so it sounds like kind of traditional eye doctors see vision therapy as, I don't know, do they see it as like woo woo sort or kind of?
Almost. Yeah. I think they do. There's so many times that they just say, oh, it doesn't work, or you're not a candidate, or they don't even mention it to someone who's been in for eye surgery. They'll say, well, this surgery might not work. You might need another one. I mean, I'm on these support groups for strabismus on Facebook, and it's a constant thing. And
Wow.
they don't tell him about it.
Yeah, that's like I said, that blows me away in a way, the parallels that we see. And you don't know what you don't know. So going back, because one of the obvious questions would be, Denise, is for parents, what should they be looking for? I mean, if your eye doctor's not going to give you a heads up, like, hey, here's something to look for. If they're not going to steer you to vision therapy or some of these other treatments, what should parents be looking for?
Well, I kind of alluded to it a little bit with what I mentioned about my daughter's story, asking those specific questions if your child is verbal and can tell you, right?
Right.
Obviously, it's way harder if your child's not verbal and they can't tell you, but I have a little checklist that I made for parents. Again, it's gonna be a little harder depending on your child. But if they're
no, is it on your website or do you have?
Yeah, and I can go over the short list. It's a very short list.
I want to hear it.
Yeah,
please.
so they lose place or skip lines or reread something when they're reading. They avoid reading or they get frustrated really quickly. They would understand better when they're listening than when they're reading. They have a short attention span for schoolwork, but if they have a preferred activity, their attention span is long. They get tired or emotional or overwhelmed during learning tasks.
Right.
They're clumsy, like I was. They bump into things or they struggle with coordination. Anytime you've been told everything is fine and you still have concerns, that's a time to go and have it checked out, But the thing is that a regular optometrist or an ophthalmologist is not going to look for the same kinds of things as a developmental optometrist will look for.
Right.
So you really have to go to the right doctor.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Now, this may be kind of a dumb question, but if your child has, this type of vision, and would they still be able to appear normal, that they have normal vision in other ways, like playing video games or things like that? Is that affected?
Yeah, a video game isn't going to have a depth perception requirement.
So that's easy. That's easier because it's not okay.
Yeah. It's in 2D most of the time, unless you're playing with the VR headset,
the VR headsets, right?
Which actually a lot of vision therapy doctors are starting to use the VR.
I was wondering about that, if that would be helpful with that.
Yeah, I actually even have one, and I've been so anti-video games that I can't make myself do it, but I bought one and I was like, I'm going to do this. And I haven't. But it is something that a lot of patients find very helpful.
Yeah, no, you've got me thinking in terms of, and I'm just thinking, are there any other questions that you can ask your child, again, that maybe aren't reading related or things? I'm thinking about, again, our audience who have non-speakers but can communicate through typing. Are there any other things that they can ask or ways to try to determine if this is a problem or a potential problem or issue?
The things I'm seeing on these checklists are going to have to do with being able to keep your place, so the hand-eye coordination piece could apply to nonverbal, if they have a hard time even picking something up or catching or whatever, right? That's a hand-eye coordination issue. I remember Jillian saying that she used to stick out her pinky when she was grabbing the cup, because it helped her orient where her hand was going to go to grab.
Where her hand was, yeah. Interesting.
So you would see compensations in that hand-eye coordination piece.
Okay. Great. Well, let's move on to our weekly segments, because I know that you are prepared. Thank you, Denise, for coming prepared.
Sure.
Yeah. So we're going to start off, and for each of these, just give you fair warning, we do have little jingles that producer Dave will play, and then we'll start off with the tip of the week. It won't necessarily be autism tip of the week, but it'll be Denise's tip of the week.
Hey, parents, gather around, it's time to speak. We're here with your tip of the week. Strategies and wisdom just for you. Autism parents, we know what you go through.
All right, it's time for our tip of the week. And as I mentioned earlier, I know that Denise, you brought one for us. What do you have?
Well, we've kind of talked about it a little bit already, but just pointing to the fact that a child may be able to see clearly and still have difficulty using their two eyes together. And a regular vision screening, even at a doctor's office, may not tell the whole story.
Okay, that's a great tip. And I'm just going to ask kind of a related tip. If every parent could know one thing about binocular vision, what would it be?
Well, not everyone has it.
Okay. Yeah.
I think we just take that for granted, not just as a parent, but as a person alive on the earth today. We just think everyone sees like we do.
Yeah, right. You just
And
assume that.
I've talked to so many people, they don't even know what binocular vision means. I say, well, I didn't see in 3D before. And they say, well, do I see in 3D? I said, well, probably. I don't know.
I can't tell you that. Right,
I can't see like you do.
Yeah, that's funny. All right. Next up, we have fact or fiction.
Get QuickTime ready, and here we go. This is Autism Fact or Fiction. We're breaking down what's real, what's rumor, and what might surprise you. Let's go.
All right. So this is, again, where I like to introduce potential stereotypes or myths or, things that may misperceptions that may be out there. But Denise, what do you have for fact or fiction?
Well, again, we've talked about a lot of this, so
Okay.
I'm kind of feeling like maybe this is just a review. The fact or fiction that I chose was 2020 means that your vision is fine.
Right. I think that's a big one, though. I think that bears repeating because I think that's such a I think that's just presumed to be fact. I think that's just so ingrained in us that that's the goal. It's just all about 2020 vision that you don't even think about that.
Right. And because my glasses corrected my vision so that it was 2020,
Yeah.
I must be fine. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess kind of related to that would be, I jotted down, like my child passed their vision screening, at school. So everything's fine.
Yeah.
Not true.
And being told that you're fine for years and years and years.
Oh, yeah.
And knowing that you're not really.
I mean, there's a little bit of trauma that goes with that, right? I mean, kind of, isn't it a little bit of being like gaslit for so many years? Like, you're like, I know this isn't true, but I can't prove it.
Yes. And I've heard it from many of my guests as well.
That they knew something was wrong, but
yeah. And one in particular had the strabismus surgery and went back to her surgeon and said, I'm really struggling. She had a complete breakdown of her visual system after her surgery. You move the eyes around. She's used to compensating a certain way, and her eyes had no idea what to do at that point. And this was a while after the surgery that she had this complete breakdown. And they treated her like she was crazy, like she should just, like they literally said, it's all in your head.
Unbelievable.
It was all in her head because it was her brain not knowing how to tell her eyes how to work together, right?
Right. No, I go back to the point you made right off the bat, Denise, in terms of how our eyes are muscles. And if you're going to have surgery on a muscle, it's just like anything else. Like I can't imagine someone who goes through, say, again, sports related that people can go through ACL surgery and just like, you just have surgery and then say, okay, you're good to go without PT, right? Without any type of follow-up. I mean, it sounds like that's kind of the expectation with the eye surgery.
It is. Yeah. And that's actually one of my favorite analogies. You would never have surgery on any other part of your body and not have physical therapy before surgery or after surgery or both, right?
Right.
And yet that's what we are doing all the time with vision, with our eye surgery.
That's crazy. Sorry, that really is crazy. I mean, that's just. I guess it just seemed, it seems like we need to progress the view there, as we have in so many other areas of medicine and healthcare. I'll put it that way. Saying it's just crazy isn't very productive.
Well, it's not, but the awareness is what we're trying to do so that people will know that there needs to be a shift.
Know.
You know, we have to demand it of the doctors.
Right. Yeah. And that's that's kind of like a whole nother conversation, right, Denise, is changing our mindset as patients in general, as advocates for our kids, you know, dealing with doctors, trusting them as experts, which they are. They're trained. They have a lot of education and training, which deserves respect. But that doesn't mean they're all knowing, and they don't know our bodies. I mean, they can't. At best, a lot of what they're doing is still kind of making educated guesses about the approach, which, that's just the way it works. But
and it's true in the vision therapy room too. They have to figure out where the missing piece is, and you can talk about vision therapy with relation to traumatic brain injury and everything too. And, I've had many of my guests that work with that population say, if you've treated one person with a traumatic brain injury, you've treated one person with a traumatic brain injury, So there's just a lot of things going on with that, and I think some of the autistic population falls into that traumatic brain injury category too, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just, they're practicing medicine, they're trying to figure it out.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, it's fascinating. All right. Well, next up on our segment is going to be our confession of the week, parent confession.
Morning routines can go astray. Found socks in the fridge one day. Laughter's the best remedy. Hey, we're just finding our own way. Mom, dad, confessions every week. Sharing joys and moments we seek. Honest tales that make us unique. Join the club, we're never meek.
All right, now's the time where we get to, as I always say, share our humanity so that we don't just have the answers. We've made mistakes too. And Denise, I mean, with 6 kids, I'm sure there's a couple of things that may have come to mind. But what would you like to share with everyone?
Well, I already talked about my daughter, Abby, and how I didn't know that she needed vision therapy till I knew, right? I don't talk about this a lot, but I actually had another child who had some struggles and still does, actually. There's another vision issue called convergence insufficiency. And my son had been struggling in school. We thought that he was just lazy because he could read. He could do the work. If he did the work, he got 100%. He got an A. But most of the time, he didn't do the work. Most of the time.
Okay.
And it was not until he was 15 that we had him diagnosed. And my doctor said it was probably the worst case of convergence insufficiency he'd ever seen.
Oh, wow. And what is it? Can you give a
convergence insufficiency means that when you try to focus close, your eyes just give up.
Okay.
You can only sustain the convergence, the eyes working together close up for a limited amount of time before it's just too tiring. And it's
like an overload, probably, right?
And you just don't want to do it, right? Which is why he wouldn't focus on his work, just didn't want to do it because it was so hard to do it. And I took him to vision therapy. He did several months of vision therapy, and he was just not really progressing with it,
Okay, yeah.
And so, by that age, it's really hard to force them to do it.
Sure.
And
to do anything, right?
I gave up. That's my big confession, actually. I hardly ever talk about it.
Yeah.
And it's still, I mean, if he wants to do something, he figures out how to do it. He's very smart. He can do whatever he wants to, but schoolwork is not it.
It sounds like he's found other ways of coping and other ways to get things done. But he also knows that option's there, right?
He does. Yeah. And I've told him that many times, you can go back and do the vision therapy and get the results if you want to.
Yeah. Well, that I could see where that would be really difficult. But there's only so much that you can do too, right? I mean, that's the part that I think we all struggle with as parents is, we want to be able to control as much as we can. We want to be able to boost our kids and help them. And I was just having that conversation with my brother the other day. It's a really tough balancing act between, like I said, pushing too hard or and pulling back too far too. And unfortunately, there's no perfect answer, right? You just do what you think is best.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. Well, we're going to turn it around 180. And again, because we like to end this on a lighter note. So we have our semi-news segment, which is Light on the Spectrum.
Light on the spectrum. A moment, person, or story bringing something good. It feels hopeful, grounded, not performative. Use it for a person, a moment, a breakthrough, a story.
All right. So like I said, what do you have for us, Denise, to give our listeners, parents out there, a little bit of hope?
Well, I think that my story is my biggest gift, right? Because neuroplasticity is a real thing,
Yeah,
you don't have to say, oh, this is just the way it is. And I mean, I've heard it so many times. People will say, I have permanent double vision. I will never see in 3D. It happens all the time, And when I went into my surgeon for my first visit with him, and I told him that my goal was to see in 3D, he didn't take that super well, really. He actually told me that he wanted me to come back in and do some more testing because they were getting some new machine in there that was going to be able to gauge whether I'd be successful, that kind of thing. And I already knew I was going to be successful, but he didn't, and so I waited and I went back in and I did all their testing and stuff and found out that he actually, and I probably shouldn't share, but I knew that he thought that I was being unrealistic.
Right. Sure. He's being overly cautious or overly skeptical, or choose your word, right? I mean,
right. But I mean, neuroplasticity says our brains can change, right? The way
100%,
we see
100%.
The way we see can change. The way we do things can change. Our bodies can improve in many different ways, right? We see that all the time at every age.
Throughout
right?
life.
It doesn't matter if you're 50 or 70 or 20, right? It can change. And so my gift is that I've proven it can change. I gained 3D vision at age 54.
That's amazing. No, that's a great message. That should give a lot of people hope. And like you said, especially the message about neuroplasticity and just how it can't be emphasized enough, because there's so many contexts that we hear that like you said, I have permanent XYZ. For those of us like in an autism world, we've dealt with a lot of negativity and now we're seeing a lot of positives. So before we wrap up, Denise, how can people find you?
Well, I have my podcast on every podcast player. And recently I put it on YouTube. It's got a static image. I don't do video because I'm not that brave.
Okay.
But, well, I just haven't felt like I could edit a video, right? I'm good at editing audio. So, but it is on YouTube. It's on all the podcast players, Healing Our Sight. I have a Facebook group. also called Healing Our Sight, and website, healingoursight.com.
Awesome.
Yeah. So they can reach me in any of those ways.
Great. Well, thank you, Denise, for joining us today. I really enjoyed the conversation. I know that our listeners and viewers will walk away looking at vision and eyes, maybe even the brain a little differently. And thanks to all of you for spending part of your day with us. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, leave us a review, share it with someone you think would benefit from the conversation. This is one of the best ways to help us reach more families, continue bringing these important stories to a wider audience. I'd also like to give a special thank you to our producer, my guy, Dave Yaz, and the entire team at Pod 617. Dave's been with me since the beginning of our podcast. We're coming up on 2 years. His expertise, creativity, and friendship have helped make the lighter side of the spectrum what it is today. So again, thank you, Denise, and we'll catch everyone else next week.